Is there anything in history that we can point to look at, to say, okay, you've had this hit, and this hit is a relatively, let's say, relatively short period of time, months, all right? And it's powerful and dramatic, just like the stock market is shown with a plunge. And you'll see, get the economic, Goldman Sachs has got numbers for first quarter and second quarter that are really to the downside. Okay, all right, so now we come through the valley. It's almost like a Passover period, all right?
Yeah.
Stay indoors, let the, everything pass over us. And then, do we have anything in history that we can point to economically that will give us some sense of how this works out?
There's a problem. There's a lot of actual, interesting, if slightly grim discussion going on among economists on this. And there's two models. So sometimes the closest thing we've had to this sort of sudden onset maybe has been, we've had recessions that were generated because we had inflation and the Fed put the economy through shock therapy.
Sure.
And after those, we had what everybody calls a V-shaped recession. The economy went plunging and then went zooming back up again. And there's one argument that says that because this is not because there are underlying imbalances. This is not like the housing bubble or something where people had run up too much debt and there's all that. And so once the virus threat recedes, then the economy will come roaring back. I guess that's what everybody's hoping for. The one concern that some people have, and I actually don't know which of these stories is true. The other possibility is that we actually were building up structural problems, but they were kind of concealed by all of the optimism, and that corporate debt had been rising, emerging market debt had been rising, student loan debt had been rising, and that it's kind of when the house falls down, you find the skeletons in the closet. That there'll be
the water goes out and you see who's not wearing trunks.
Yeah,
right.
And so there's some possibility of that. I mean, I don't expect this one. I don't think this is going to be like 2008, where it took about 7 years to get back to anything that resembled full employment. That shouldn't be that kind of thing. But whether everything will look fine a year from now is much more doubtful.
U-shape, more U-shape rather than V-shape. In other words, because when you have the peaking, okay, if you look at the projections of the infections and everything else, you've got a peaking, but it continues.
I've seen that Goldman forecast is one which is the virus is supposed to follow this kind of hump-shaped, and actually everything depends on how high the hump is, whether it overloads our hospitals or not. But the economy, most of those forecasts, which are about terrifying economic descent in the next few months, call for rapid recovery late this year. They don't know that. That's one possible scenario, honestly, I don't know. I mean, if I had to make a picture of it, what I would do is draw a V and then a much shallower, longer U on top of it, and then step back a ways and take off my glasses and get a blurry picture in which either one of them could be true. Because we really don't know. It'd be the cliche about uncharted territory, but we really have never seen anything like this before.
Right, exactly. And we'll see how it all works out. Well, everybody, wishes everyone remain safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Social distancing is what you got to do. That makes all the sense in the world. And I think that, your comments today will help our viewers quite a bit. The book is called Arguing with Zombies, Economics, Politics, and the Fight for a Better Future. This has been wonderful. And if you're not reading Paul Krugman's statements, and if you're not going on YouTube to listen to what he has to say, and even if you don't agree with his points of view, he's a great teacher. And this is a man that you really want to listen to. I have found him over the years to be tremendously helpful and an absolutely fantastic educator, even if I'm not going to CUNY or Princeton before that, et cetera.